Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is episode 115. This is our practice edition where we talk about improvements we made throughout the week and tie them back to lean principles. My name is Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing and Arda Cards.
And I am Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision. And our quote: "There are many experts on how things have been done up to now. If you think something could use a little improvement, you are the expert." By nice. Robert Brault. I don't know how I feel about the second part of that, but I feel like the first part of that sentence or statement is a good thing to remember. That expertise often only is within the current paradigm.
I think I really like this as a way to view the world, even if it's not true. That you should assume, like, you sort of want to empower people to go be the expert, even if it turns out they weren't. Right? It's like, go try. See what happens.
Well, and also don't let, it's helpful not to ignore precedent and not to ignore expertise about why things are the way they are or done the way they are done. And simultaneously, it can be very easy to get caught up in the, that's just impossible mindset and stop thinking about new ways to do things.
I have not, I would say, I don't know how to walk that line, because I think, I joke with, Kyle said to me once that, he's a person who learns things the hard way. And I can 100% relate, where people would be like, oh, don't do it that way. I'm like, why? They're like, it's just not a good idea. And then probably, to me, that's all they say, but probably list off a bunch of good reasons. But I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to do it. And then I do it. And then I'm like, guys, that was a bad idea for these reasons. And they're like,
Yeah.
Yeah. We all knew that. So like at the same time, I do feel like I am willing to push things and try things in a way that a lot of people aren't. And that's been also successful. So you get some of each. I'm not really sure how. I'm sure there's a better way, but it does seem really hard to not let that paralyze you. Right? To assume everyone is an expert and that's why everything is done this way.
Right.
Would preclude. Would definitely keep you from seeing new possibilities, I think.
Yeah. Maybe. I think, not to say I have done this, but it seems like you could make a sort of an evaluation sort of rubric to
current state almost.
Yeah, exactly. Just to kind of like assess whether it's worthwhile to pursue. Yeah. Because I think so many times it's just people's guts, and they're like, well, people don't do that because it's not the good way. And you're like, well, let's see what it's, run an experiment, like what it's going to cost us to figure out if this is actually true or not. And people rarely actually take that next step to actually do the experiment or even design the experiment or even think about it as an experiment. Right. It's just, we all get caught up in the, like, this is the way it's done. Anything else is bad because it hasn't been. That's
or here's my new idea and this is what we're going to do. Instead of like, here's my hypothesis about what might be wrong with the current state. Yeah. We're going to try this because we think it will fix that. Yeah. And then crucially, did it fix that? Right. Which also is missed sometimes. I think what we're talking about here is we're reinventing Toyota Kata. Yeah. Which is great because it's available to all of us.
That is very meta.
What?
Given the topic at hand.
Oh, yeah.
We're reinventing something that already existed.
True. Right. Yes.
Ignoring expertise, perhaps.
Anyway, some improvements?
Yes. So we were just trying to avoid, the bigger our shop gets and the more work we do and the larger and more established our customers become, the more our work starts to become a document collating and tracking puzzle. So I was pinging a few friends on how they handled some of their like outgoing documents. And discovered that a lot of people add certificate of conformance language to their packing slips so they can have one document that serves multiple purposes. So we did that.
Smart.
Yeah. And that's been very helpful in reducing significant workload. Not
Interesting.
that it was part. We could have also just like made a more efficient way to do the certificate of conformance document on its own, because the one we had was a little bit. Anyway, don't need to get into the Microsoft Word nitty gritty. Okay. But this just really made it simpler, and it made it so it didn't have to go across multiple people's lanes. And
that's cool.
Yeah, simple thing, but cool.
Nice. I forget what made this got this in my head this week, but I was appreciating the power that it would like for that the fact that Toyota is able to work from SOPs reliably is like such a huge superpower.
Yeah.
Because in most businesses, including mine, we write SOPs, but then when someone is doing it who's very good at it, they don't work to SOPs because why would you, right? Mm-hmm. But like the second you can just work from an SOP all the time,
yeah,
it's really very powerful. And so I don't know, what made me think of this is like this making fewer documents, probably good no matter what.
Yeah.
But it speaks to, and I'll speak for myself. We've had issues including all the documents we've intended to in packaging. Because they're different for different packages, right? Like one that's wholesale includes maybe a waiver, and one that's not doesn't, and different, or the waiver is somewhere else. And it's because we don't work to an SOP.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest. Anyway, one of our listeners asked if we could repeat the 8 lean wastes. So I'm just going to rattle through those and then jump into some improvements here. Overproduction, which is said to be the mother of all wastes.
The fundamental waste.
And leads to a lot of the others. Overprocessing, excess inventory, defects, transportation, wasted motion, waiting, wasted human potential. And I think we talked about why overproduction does lead to all the other ones. It's very confusing in the beginning. Finally clicked a while ago. But just as an example, if you make too much of something that isn't directly needed in the next process, then those items often have to get stored somewhere. So that's overprocessing. That is obviously excess inventory just immediately. And also overproduction means that you are producing more than your actual demand per unit time, which means that you need to hold excess inventory to absorb that peak in production. And so you have excess inventory leading into that process and coming out of that process almost always. Defects are going to be much harder to spot, and you're probably going to make a lot more of them because you make more than is immediately used on the next station where you could pick up on those defects. Transportation, again, like if you make too much of something, you have to go put it in storage and you have to take it out of storage, or it gets racked into bins that then get unracked. It's just more. Yeah, right. And we do a lot of that. And then all that is wasted motion. The parts are waiting because you made too many. The people can be waiting because by making too many, you often don't make enough of something else. That's not always true, but and then wasted human potential. I'm not sure that that's tied in, but wasted human potential. And then the 9th lean waste, general chaos. Anyway, we updated. This is really dumb. We've been so. Our shop is 2 doors down from where we were living through the pandemic. And so I used to ship stuff to where we were living, and then it just never got updated because I'm often over here anyway for to make coffee or whatever. Yeah. Or for lunch or something. Or to record this podcast. And so just for the longest time I was shipping stuff here and walking it back and forth. So finally I added the other address, but every time I had to go switch it. Oh. And so finally I just made it the default on a bunch of platforms, and that's my improvement.
Look at that. Bob's your uncle.
Yep.
Nice.
And I guess I do want to say
so impactful.
it's
so
very impactful, and no one is going to give you a pat on the back in most organizations. Instead, they're going to give you a blank stare and like, what kind of idiot are you that you were shipping it to the wrong place to begin with? Which is just like, anyone who thinks that just hasn't run, like there's a bazillion of these.
Yeah.
And so like they are very worth celebrating, I think, and celebrating for like the people you're managing also.
Yeah.
Because you want people to be hunting these out because they're such easy wins.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all.
Nice. Excuse me. We had some defects sawing some larger than usual material for our shop.
Mm-hmm.
We have a pretty large capacity saw, but we usually do pretty small parts.
No big deal.
I'm trying to toot my own horn over here. So we didn't like saw blades. The tooth count you match to material thickness more than material type. Well, actually, completely to thickness, not at all to material type.
Okay.
Unless you're going to carbide. No, but that still count. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
First thing was right.
Yeah.
So we hadn't gotten any of the coarsest blades that were available for this saw, and I was sawing some very thick, very expensive material and getting severe blade wander after it was weird. It did very well for several blanks, and then everything just started going to hell, even with new blades and stuff.
That's so curious.
It was a little curious. Even before it went like totally to hell, I was getting some like dish to the cut and some other stuff.
The thing you mentioned to me on the phone was really interesting. I'd always thought about tooth count being about carrying. You don't want too few teeth in the cut because you don't want a tooth to be able to like gouge.
Over engage.
Yeah, but then I always thought that it was about the gullet being enough sufficient to take the chip all the way out the other side without jamming up. Then you mentioned something.
Yeah, which is true. I think what you said is very true. But then the other aspect is a blade is effectively a beam. To anybody who's not a bandsaw blade is effectively a beam as it's pushing through the material, and a beam has a limited amount of strength before it will start to deflect. And if you're cutting a hard material, in this case it was 316 stainless, which needs a fair amount of force to engage, or otherwise it work hardens the material. If you don't have a really coarse blade, you have many more teeth engaged, and those all are having to engage in the material. And so I think there's just more force involved in the cut.
Yeah, so like chip formation relies on achieving cutting pressure.
Yeah.
And you need enough cutting pressure on per tooth to do a good job and not work harden.
Yeah.
And then if you have a ton of teeth, that's a ton of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
That's cool. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
My shitty, tiny little bandsaw has that problem with pretty small things, but I suspect it's all that. And I just never thought through like the, first principles. It's just like, how many teeth are in the cut?
Well,
because you do feel that with saws, like if you don't push hard enough, it like doesn't cut that well, even if it's not work hardening. Like even in aluminum, like you suddenly load it much harder and it like suddenly like kind of takes off. And
yeah. And funny thing, sort of a confession, we bought this saw because we were having major sawing issues with our old manual bandsaw. And then when we bought it, I was like, oh, let's get some blades. And then I talked to the blade salesman. He was like, well, you need this and this and this and this. And I was like, probably could have not bought this new saw and just gotten some new blades for my old saw.
Interesting.
But
it does seem like it's been
it's been very good.
Yeah.
That was not the only issue. Like
it's also an auto saw.
It's an auto saw, and then being able to cut, like it has coolant, which our manual saw did not. So we can cut stainless and titanium much better. And
interesting.
Not that you can't cut those with that, but it's slower and all that stuff. Anyway.
Interesting. You sent me a text about having the price come through on all of our material orders so that you didn't have to go check old invoices to get it.
Yeah.
So we added those to Arda, so now they will come through on future orders.
Nice.
That was the improvement.
Pretty standard PO sort of thing.
Not yet a PO, but we are working on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is an Airtable in our job management system.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing a lot of assemblies that include commercial off-the-shelf hardware.
Okay.
So like we make several parts and then we bolt them together and stuff.
Oh, cool.
But this started to become sort of a tracking nightmare. What had been ordered, what had not, what do we need for each thing?
Interesting.
Of these 40 part numbers that we're making, which of them have commercial off the shelf stuff that needs to be ordered or not? So I ordered sort of a duplicate of our I made sort of a duplicate of our material ordering sheet in our job management system, but it's for commercial off the shelf items.
Why distinguish? Just for clarity? Like, it strikes me that those are the same, just one requires assembly versus machining or something.
What's the same?
Like ordering a screw and ordering a bar of stainless. Like, you're getting a thing in the shop that you need.
Oh.
What's the distinguish?
The difference is like how we group and sort. So like,
gotcha. So it's just to like...
Yeah. The material ordering thing like groups different part numbers by material type and size.
Oh, cool.
So like if you're getting... one partner out of 2-inch round, part number out of 2-inch round and another part number out of 2-inch round. It'll add them up so you know how much total you need.
Smart.
This does not do that, but it sort of sorts it out from everything else.
Yeah.
So you're not looking at a bunch of noise and having to filter.
That's funny. I mean, the second you're doing mental stuff, looking at a relational database, you have an opportunity, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. But hard to flag.
Yeah.
That's cool. We added login info to Arda for ordering our stickers. So I went to order, couldn't remember the login. Had to reset my
company stickers, like swag.
It just says Arda. Sorry, austere. It says austere on it. We went to reorder them. We include them in a lot of our orders. And couldn't remember my login info. Requested, new login. Go to the email. Click the link. Create a new login. It's like that is all waste. So just stuck it in the notes with the order card. That's the improvement.
Nice. The person who was handling our anodizing experiments moved on to other things. And then we had a rush part that needed to get done. And the lead time from an outside vendor was going to push us outside of our delivery window. So we're like, okay, good opportunity for me to take on anodizing. And I guess a little background, we were like running this kind of very basic experiment to see if we could routinely sort of reliably anodize parts.
Okay.
And so we did a very kind of like cheapest like test that we could do. Bought as little equipment as possible. And part of that was just heating the stuff in like a crock pot. Because it all has to be at elevated temperatures. But then I went to do it and was like, this is really very challenging. There's not enough space for all of the different jars of solutions in the crock pot. Crock pot doesn't have much juice, so it has a really hard time getting up to and maintaining temperature. And I was like, this is not going to work. So I had it in my head that kind of the next step was to go like whole hog basically to our like final system. But as an interim, I just bought I think it's called like a bain-marie, like a food warming unit. Okay. Like a water bath that you put like hotel pans in. And used that on Monday, and it was great. And it only works for the ones that need to be at the same temperature, but I was able to keep 4 different solutions all at the correct temp. And
are those all dyes, or those are different?
No, it's like a degrease.
Oh, gotcha. And they're all the same temp.
It's within within like 20 degrees.
Yeah.
Degrease, etch, deox, and dye.
Very
then
cool.
use the sealant. Supposed to be hotter than that, so I use the crock pot for that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting conversation with someone who did a lot of work anodizing at a very large consumer electronics company, and it's interesting hearing him talk through the process that they went through for 2 reasons to me. I always like to know how, what is the state of the art, right? Because then you're like, okay, that's what I'm shooting for. And I feel like often when you're learning a new process, you're not sure how much of your failures have to do with not knowing stuff versus not having, like, lack of skill or lack of equipment or lack of technique kind of.
Yeah.
And so it's just nice to know, like, okay, that's how they do it.
Benchmark it.
Yeah. It's like, that's how I'll do it. Or if I'm not and I'm still seeing failures, I now know sort of what the delta is. So it was interesting with, like, I was asking him a lot about sort of quantifying the different steps of the process, because I think that's something we ran into, is anodizing is a series of steps. As you stack steps and are uncertain about the condition of that step because you can't necessarily observe it, then by the time you get to the end and something goes wrong, you're like, okay, well, it's one of those 10 steps. and you don't really know what factors changed or didn't, or so anyway. It's
kind of like welding a little bit. Sometimes where you're like several variables that are all sort of interplaying. Yeah.
Learning to TIG weld aluminum was definitely like, you get to the, like, it's going to, I don't know, learning to drive was the same. You could I could either stay centered in my lane, or I could keep my speed consistent, or I could know if someone's behind me, you know, but like not all three. Welding was the same, where like it would be going to shit, and it's because like my arc length was, or like, you know, my tungsten was too far away or whatever. And then eventually you're like, what's going on? And you look at the tungsten and it's just like covered in aluminum. Anyway. So this was a very exciting one. And I kick myself that I haven't been, that I didn't do it sooner. We got a new photo, area. So just like a nice seamless with, I could have bought just the seamless, and every time I've gone in the past to buy one, I'm like, I can just make that, and then I wouldn't make it. Yeah. And then this time I was like, you know what? I'm just buying the seamless, and then they had a kit with all the lighting that they recommended, and I was like, I'm doing that. I used to take photos, like product shots for the website and social, and then edit them for like not an insignificant amount of time to get the background to be nice and white and even.
Yeah.
I took some shots and they're just like immediately great. Like, yes, I will touch them up, but I don't need to. Like, they're already better than what I was getting. And what I wanted to mention here is this has all been as part of an effort. We're trying to systemize adding, like doing color drops and stuff on the website and adding products to the website. And so we're just trying to take every part of the process, document how it's done, and simplify how it's, like, just make that step, like, okay, if it's a core business function, like, have a spot to do it, right? Like, here are all the tools you'll need. And so we're just trying to do that. And it has been such a success. We've had it set up for 2 days now, and I've taken so many, like, anything in the shop that I pick up and I'm like, oh, and like, normally I take a photo and it's not great because now I just drop it in there, take a photo. Internal stuff, I mean, a lot of stuff for social media just instantly is visually appealing instead of it being like, yeah, I'm not going to post that, right? Now it's just really easy to do it. So I'm definitely trying to like double down on observing when a part of a step is high friction. Yeah. Because you just don't do it. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I want to set up a cleaning station for my bikes at home that is always set up. Yeah, same. Because I never clean my bike. I just changed all the gears and chains on all of my bikes because they were just absolutely wrecked. Anyway.
Yeah. We hired somebody.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
Pretty excited. Hopefully we'll take on more of my admin workload specifically. I think, like, not initially, got to get them up to speed and stuff. But been going back and forth a lot over the last month or two, or quite a while really, but more concertedly in the last month or two, whether I wanted to hire skilled shop floor labor or someone to take on more of the admin side. And it just kind of came, well, through a lot of discussion with many people, including you, became clear that, like, my gift is not admin. And I can still be involved in making decisions, but especially with the kind of lifts that I think we need to make over the next year in terms of our like core competency process improvements.
Yeah.
Having me available to the shop floor would, I think, be much more beneficial for the business. And like, if I have slack time in my personal, not that I anticipate much slack time, but a little more availability or a little less hair on fire.
Smoldering hair.
Smoldering hair, yeah. It's just like a nice, it keeps you warm. That like a major bottleneck for us right now is like some of the more skilled aspects of shop floor labor that happen simultaneously, like we've talked about, doing like setups happening across multiple machines. And that's somewhere I can instantly plug in without having to train anybody.
Right. You mentioned something leading up to this about quoting that I thought was significantly.
I'm very much hoping to hand off a lot of the quoting work. And I think initially I've always been like, well, that's something I kind of have to do because I understand the whole thing and blah, 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 blah. I understand our customers, whatever. And then it occurred to me that like, if someone were to have enough wherewithal and knowledge and skill to put a quote together completely in terms of like getting all of the correct documents assigned to part numbers and loaded into the system and quantities and material pricing and all of that stuff, that's probably 90% of the work. And then there's 10% left, which is making sure the prices look right.
Yeah.
And that's something that can be handed off to me, and someone can pretty quickly, hopefully, get a sense for how we handle, or can always be a touch point for me or someone with more experience. But that would be a massive, like separating out those two instead of thinking of it as one task would be a huge
I think that's huge and really I think is a major unlock for everyone. The second you can just cut up tasks, because a lot of pushback, I mean, I'll speak about inventory specifically, but a lot of pushback is like, oh, but there's so many things that you need to know, like how much we need that day or what's available or what's good. And it's like, okay, well, do all that and none of the rest. Like if you can just separate that out, that 80% of a task that is easy. Yeah. Like that's such a big unlock for systemizing business processes, I think.
Yeah. It's almost two completely different tasks, really, at the end of the day. We roll it into one because it sort of makes sense to have someone's head in it continuously.
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
It feels like that way to minimize communication and delays and stuff. But it is two very different tasks. One is like basic clerical work, and the other is like complex thought processes about manufacturing.
Right.
That happen to
That's a
meet
great point.
in one place.
The other funny thing, I think we talked about this, but probably like a year ago at this point. If for a second I said like, hey, your time is worth $1,000 an hour, which doing the right things it is, then suddenly there is a very high cost to you doing that work. And which also means that suddenly there's a significant budget for errors, which is still less than the error of like, you know, right person, wrong activity kind of thing. So I think there's that too, right? Like, let's say that person does mess up a quote here and there, but meanwhile you're off like growing the business 50%.
Right.
Like, okay. Like, but it would be so easy to focus on that and go like, oh no, like how did you mess that up? We're hemorrhaging, you know, we lost $5,000 on this job.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we added a few $100,000.
Yeah. Meanwhile, our bottom line grew by 40%.
Yeah. So.
Completely. It's so easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's cost accounting in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah. We didn't touch on it in the last episode, but I had a note there that was cost. Put cost versus cost. Oh, this was a different thought. Do you want to talk about it real quick?
Hit me.
I think a lot of times when thinking through improvements, people often just compare the cost that you spend on whatever the process is right now, and then like the direct cost savings that you'll get from the improvement, and almost always forget about all of the knock-on effect cost reductions.
Interesting.
That are so huge, because it's like I do this too when I'm trying to rationalize and like, okay, well, if you did,
That's a very good point.
you did this, you'll save whatever 3 minutes each time you do this task. You do this task 3 times a day,
Right.
et
Totally.
cetera, et cetera. And it's like, yeah,
Return to our roots of cost accounting.
yeah. And
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, I mean, I can see that, but it's also like, I was doing a mental exercise where I was thinking about a friend's process in their shop and being like, you should really move this over here because it's going to do this. And then I did the math and I was like, that's not that many minutes actually in a year.
Yeah.
But then I was like, the benefits are going to be multifold because it's not really that person just doesn't have to walk back and forth. It's that now they're going to be available for several different things in one place.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have like a compounding effect of their labor. Anyway.
And everyone will view the floor as malleable, and everyone will start thinking like, what else should I move?
Oh yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So there's like the knock-on effects and then the knock-on effects.
Something I used to do with like mechanical design. I mean, lately I've just been designing buckles, which are pretty simple.
Mechanical.
Too simple sometimes. Is thinking about like first order reaction forces, but then like second degree reaction forces too, because often those are the ones that you forget about and then like kind of screw you up down the road a bit. Similar.
It's similar, but reverse. The first order often is like not such a game changer. And then the second order is where you like you really get it back.
Yeah. I mentioned this last episode, new whip board, trying to figure out a system that is realistic, because previously I think we've started at a point of like, how should we do this? And then we look and we read and we try a thing, and turns out most of the examples that are out there are by companies who are 10 years, 20, 50, 80 years into this. And so there's so much underlying best practice that we don't have, that like, and just like the scale of the business, like so many things I've really been trying to focus on, like, let's put up a whip board that reflects our current state and how crappy it is, instead of like, let's pretend that each of us only has one thing in our lane. Like, no, I have like 7 and I'm not doing a good job, and that's a bad idea. And right. Like, but that is what it is. And actually what I've discovered, I think, is that the problem was each person shouldn't have a lane, which is normally what you see. I think each task in the company should have a lane. And oftentimes a task, like a core function of the business, has one person in a lot of businesses. But not always. And often people are flex, right? Like the person in the shipping department also does this other task. Both have to get done.
Yeah.
Improvements is another core function of the business that everyone should be doing a little bit.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my current, I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Report back.
Yeah.
We're all dying to know.
Well, I don't know. I've really had trouble having a system that sticks.
Yeah. Same.
With managing that and also managing my time. So
I feel you.
yeah. Trying to get better.
Yeah. We got a new machine, which is cool.
Man, you're just on fire. New hire, new machine.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Apparently. And then maybe more importantly, we completely rearranged the shop while we had riggers there. That's awesome. Which I think I had sort of foretold a few episodes back. But pretty excited about it so far.
Yeah, how is it?
Have you been over? You were over.
I saw it like hours after it was done.
Hours after, okay. Yeah, we were still putting the shop back together.
Yeah.
So far feels very good. Interestingly, we're using a lot more, like the shop before basically felt like we had stuff in one half and then an empty half.
Yep.
And now it feels much more distributed and even like kind of full. Not full, but like there's sort of stuff everywhere. Okay. But simultaneously, I do think we're walking less. And the layout feels a little bit better. We have more of kind of like a central planning sort of purchasing area that moves forward and like receiving. And then anyway, it makes more sense for the whole process. I think probably things will still move around a bit, but it's only been a few days really.
Okay.
Yeah. Friday, Monday, Tuesday.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there are no monuments.
There are no monuments. There was 2 machines
If you
that
pay
didn't
someone a
move.
few $1,000s.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was kind of like we were only going to move one thing, and then we were like, oh, the riggers are going to be here. Should we move that? And then that just cascaded into, I think we didn't move 2 shelving units, and we didn't move our lathe and 1 mill.
That's cool.
And then everything else in the shop moved.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's good to remember that it's doable.
Yeah. And so for electrical, did you just run?
We ran it all prior.
You did?
Yeah.
Nice. So it's just ready to go.
Yeah, pretty much. And, initially I was like, oh, well, we can't do that until we move the machine because we got to pull the cord off the wall. And then I was like, oh, just buy more cord. Have it hanging and then put that one in a box once they take the machine away.
I should really listen to that.
Whatever, the $50, $100 or something is not worth saving for the extra hassle.
Yeah.
And it was very cool. Like we ran all day Wednesday pretty much. We kind of shut down production at like 2:00 on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Got the last machines disconnected that needed to get moved.
Okay.
The riggers showed up at 7, moved everything. They were gone by like 8:30. And then we were making parts again at noon the next day.
Wow.
Which was pretty rad.
That's pretty rad.
I mean, there's a whole machine that now the new machine is still being set up. So we're not making parts on that. But everything else was pretty much up to speed.
That's awesome.
It was great. It's
very cool.
Still very stressful, but great.
2 little ones. We labeled our 2-order and our ordered bins for our Kanban cards.
Oh.
They're unlabeled. I made a video about it, and Rob Lockwood commented. He was like, how do I know which one is your order bin? And anyway, so we labeled them.
Mm-hmm.
It's been on our list for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
It's so dumb. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know.
No,
We've been busy,
but it's like the fundamental of being 2 people in a shop. Right.
It's also just like being really, really busy.
It's being really, really busy, but I think those things often...
Yeah, that's true.
They go undealt with until somebody arrives and is like, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's
a good point. You can really get away with a lot because...
You can get away with a lot.
Yeah. It's just not much going on.
Oh, actually, on that note, we moved our Arda order bins today.
Oh, cool.
To somewhere that makes more sense.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we set up a snack area.
Nice.
Before it was
outside.
It was all over kind of, and like it was just there wasn't really a spot, and like that is a core function of the business.
Turns out.
Yeah, and you just need to, I don't know. So we finally did that. Have a little coffee machine, have some snacks.
Nice.
Have some Arda cards. And then last one.
Some Arda cards about your snacks.
Yeah, we do. Printed and laminated some Toyota Kata cards.
Oh, yeah.
With the 5 questions and just stuck them to the wall around the shop.
Like a bunch?
5.
But like multiple sections or like multiple sets that you put in different places, or like just a random inspirational quote?
No. The 5 questions I read last.
No, I know, but is it like all 5 of them next to each other in one spot, or all 5 of them next to each other in a bunch of spots?
But all of them in a bunch of spots all together.
No half measures here.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's something I've read so many times, and then every time I read it, I'm like, right. It's just like an injection of sanity to it as a complicated world or something. I like them.
Nice. Cool. That's all I got.
Me too. Thanks all for listening to another episode. You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet, and arda.cards on Instagram and on the internet.
You can find me at lichen_mfg on Instagram, lichenprecision.com, and the pod at incrementalci. We will talk to you soon.
And we have a Patreon.
Patreon.
Go check it out.
Check it out.